As John said, my name's Deniol. I'm an IPC church planter planting in Chester in northwest England. I first presented our plans for Chester to the UK Partnership a week after our first service in 2021. So it's great to see many familiar faces from UK Partnership meetings over the last 4 years. And I'm now also helping with the church planting committee work. I want to tell you a little bit about our vision as the International Presbyterian Church, our presbytery's vision for church planting. Our vision is to grow into an effective nationwide Presbyterian church in a generation. Jonty's started to tell us a little bit about that. I want to tell you a little bit about it by telling you about my grandfather, John Davis, and his brother, Errol Davis, who were Presbyterian ministers in the Presbyterian Church of Wales. And it's good to do a bit of name dropping at events like this. So I'm going to throw the gauntlet down. And they were good friends and understudies of Martin Lloyd-Jones. I used up my Martin Lloyd-Jones anecdote at last year's UK Partnership meeting. So I got on the phone to my uncle yesterday and said, I need a new Martin Lloyd-Jones anecdote. And he told me this story, which isn't really related to anything, but he said when he was first starting out in ministry, my uncle, he was a minister in South Wales, and Lloyd-Jones was a good friend to him. He'd call him up a lot and help him, mentor him. And he had this reoccurring dream at one point because he was going to speak at the Bala Ministers Conference, which is the conference that Lloyd-Jones famously kind of spoke at each year. And my uncle was going to be speaking, giving an address at this conference, and he had this reoccurring dream that because ministry was so busy for him, he'd turn up at the conference and he was underprepared and he had no notes. And he'd meet Lloyd-Jones on the door and he'd say, "How are you, my boy? Show me your notes." And he had no notes to show him. And he turned up at the conference, actually on the day of the conference when he was giving this address, and Lloyd-Jones was on the door, and he said, "How are you, my boy?" And he felt very underprepared. And he said, "Let's go and grab some tea." So they went and had a cup of tea, and my uncle said, I felt like I needed to share this story with Lloyd-Jones. So he told him about this recurring dream that he'd had, and Lloyd-Jones said, "Oh, my boy, that was the devil. If it was me meeting you, I would have told you to trust God and go and preach." And my uncle said that was something of a measure of a man. But that's a name drop. That's the gauntlet thrown down. Let's see if we can top that this afternoon. My grandfather, his brother, they were Presbyterian ministers in the Presbyterian Church of Wales. They really admired Lloyd-Jones like many other people. So when Lloyd-Jones gave a stirring address in the 1960s to evangelicals to leave their denominations, my grandfather and his uncle were two of the Presbyterian ministers who left their denomination, the Presbyterian Church of Wales. My grandfather, towards the end of his life, after he'd retired, looked back and thought it was an error, or at least in hindsight, they could see that it would have been a good thing if they would have started in place of these liberalizing denominations, which is why Lloyd-Jones had given this appeal for men to leave, churches to leave. In place of these liberalizing denominations, to start a reformed and evangelical Presbyterian denomination in England and Wales. Because they didn't, that meant that there was really no viable Presbyterian church in England and Wales for the last 50, 60 years, as Jonty's told us about already. We've heard a little bit about that, and so that feeds into our vision. Our vision is that we want to establish an effective nationwide Presbyterian church within a generation. We want to realize the vision primarily through church planting. We want to multiply churches that are connected and are impacting the Christians in the congregation and the world around them. We want to multiply churches that are active and clear in evangelism, that are deliberate in discipleship as we seek to live redeemed lives as God's people. And so to that end, we're working towards Project 2030 that you can read about in the book. Project 2030 is a simple target to plant 20 churches by 2030 and 30 churches in total in 20 years. Since we adopted Project 2030 as a church planting strategy back in 2016, we've planted, this time last year, we had planted 11 churches, and 4 churches have started in the last year. So we've planted 15 churches since 2016 and when we adopted this vision. You'll see in the booklet details of the most recent church plants. You'll also see a couple of pages where there are details of all the church plants that have begun since 2016. That means that we have planted that amount of churches, which puts us firmly on course to reach our target of planting 20 churches by 2030, and we're really thankful for that. We're delighted with that. It does mean as well, with those kind of numbers, that although everything is, as John T's saying, very small still, there is a sense of momentum now in IPC. And it has a sense of this being a genuine church planting movement, the kind of movement that is necessary if we're going to establish an effective Presbyterian denomination in a generation. My reflection is that when we meet as a presbytery, as ministers, it does feel as though we are meeting not only as presbytery, but also as a church planting network. There are currently, I think, 25 churches in the UK in our presbytery, and in 19 of those 25 churches, the senior minister is the person who planted the church. So a huge percentage of our presbytery has church planting just in its DNA, the churches that are still being established as church plants. That's why it feels at the same time as being a church planting network, and it has all the excitement of a genuine church planting movement to it. John T's going to come back up and tell you a little bit about ways you can support this movement. And we'll flag again at the end, if you don't scan this QR code, get the link, do follow that, and there's resources there that can give you more information on that.